Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, women take to the streets in Makurdi, the Benue state capital, to demand full implementation of open grazing prohibition as one person is feared killed a day after the act came into effect. President Buhari requests to lay the 2018 budget before the National Assembly next Tuesday. Lawmakers in the House of Representatives kick against the proposal. Our big story tonight looks at the state of Nigeria's sporting infrastructure with special focus on federal stadiums spread across the country. And Spanish High Court judge remands 8 former Catalan ministers in custody over the region's push for independence.
And on business news tonight, National Competitiveness Council of Nigeria releases first ever sub-national competitive index, ranks Lagos #1 amongst 36 states.
On sports news, coach Christopher Danjuma leads 18 Falconets to Casablanca ahead of their crucial FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup qualifier against Morocco.
And from Abuja, EFCC sets up crack team of investigators to probe the 200 million naira contract scandal allegedly involving former SGF Babachir Lawal.
We begin with what appears to be a fallout of the anti-open grazing law in Benue State when women from all the 23 local government areas of the state staged a protest against the alleged killing of one person by men suspected to be herdsmen in local government area of the state. The herdsmen are said to be part of those who are leaving the state on account of the new law and are not willing to adopt ranching as demanded by the law. The protesters are asking for the full enforcement of the open grazing prohibition law to end the killings.
After a lot of controversies, the Benue State Open Grazing Prohibition and Ranches Establishment Law finally came into effect on November 1st. But on that same day, one person was reported killed in Logo Local Council of Benue State by armed Fulani herdsmen. This killing has raised another concern regarding the grazing bill, and so women from the 23 local councils have taken to the streets demanding the enforcement of the new law. In hundreds, both old and young, marched through Cool Park to the government house, insisting that ranching remains the best option. The women are worried that if nothing is done fast, there will be more trouble for them.
Benue State is the food basket of the nation, and if you don't go to the farm, you cannot produce that much food. And for the reason that these Fulani people are not allowing us to go to the farm, this bill is just appropriate and it has come at the right time. The Fulanis have no respect for life, let alone women and children. If they come to your farm, even if they are children, they will kill you and kill the children who are leaders of tomorrow. We cannot afford to be losing our children and youths like that to the Fulani men.
For the state governor, the sanctity of life of his people is sacrosanct.
We cannot continue to live in fear, and we cannot continue to live with killers who have no respect for human lives, who killed, who maimed, who rape our women and children, who destroy our farmlands, and who destroy our property. But what the law is simply saying is that those who want to stay in Benue State and ranch their cattle, land will be provided, facilities will be provided, and they will ranch their cattle. But those who cannot ranch their cattle should find another place elsewhere in Nigeria where they can go and graze.
Meanwhile, the State House of Assembly has called the United Nations and the international community to prevail on President Muhammadu Buhari to act fast before this snowballs into another hydra-headed monster.
Still on the anti-grazing law, the onset of the dry season marks the period of migration for cattle by cattle herders, particularly southwards in search of greener pastures. These annual migrations have increasingly resulted in violent conflicts between the herdsmen and farmers whose crops are often trampled on and eaten by cattle. This next report revisits the increasing menace of armed herdsmen and the indignation of farming communities across the country.
From the initial minor skirmishes over cattle straying into farmlands, clashes between herdsmen and farmers have become increasingly deadly, bloody, and often unprovoked. Perhaps it was the Agatu massacres of Benue State in February 2016 that finally arrested global attention to the problem. Invading herdsmen armed with sophisticated firearms struck farming communities in an 8-week-long bloody campaign, sacking Agatu, Logo, and Buruku. The horror extended to the southeast when on April the 25th, 2016, armed herdsmen invaded Nimbo community, a border town in Uzuawani area of Enugu State, and massacred scores of residents. The mayhem attracted the indignation of the state government and indeed the entire Igbo nation, whose leaders rose in unison to condemn the killings. Cattle herders also drove their animals through communities in Edo, Delta, and Cross River states, brazenly trespassing into farmlands, schools, and even homesteads, striking fear into the hearts of the residents who could only watch helplessly. Between February and April 2017, Kafanchan community in Jama, local council area of southern Kaduna, would also taste the wrath of rampaging herdsmen. The indigents accused the state government of tacitly supporting the invaders. Ekiti state government, however, responded to the attacks by herdsmen almost instantaneously and decisively. Governor Ayo Fayoshi immediately banned open grazing, constituted a task force to restrict movement of cattle, and read the Riot Act to their owners.
I'm going to take a bill to the House of Assembly. I'm going to criminalize it. I'm going to ensure that this thing stops. They are hiding under this grazing thing to destroy our people.
Following protests by Benue farmers and indigents, the State House of Assembly passed the Open Grazing Prohibition and Ranches Establishment Bill, which was signed into law by Governor Samuel Otom in May 2017. Youths in Plateau State also demanded a similar response after herdsmen struck communities in Miango local council area between September and October 2017, culminating in the killing of no fewer than 30 people, mostly women and children, purportedly while under the protection of security forces. As the dry season sets in, migration by cattle herders in search of pasture for their animals is bound to spike. But state governments and residents have grown impatient with the no longer friendly visitors. And if care is not taken, the scale of conflict this time might be unprecedented.
Joining us now on the News at 10 live from our studio in Abuja is a legal practitioner, Madaki Ame, as we look at this critical issue of the herdsmen and farmers clashing in the country. Thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. Ame. How do you see the implementation of the anti-grazing prohibition law playing out in Benue State?
Well, thank you very much. I think we have a major challenge, right now. The challenge is that it's a good idea to prohibit open grazing because the practice is primitive and it's not sustainable. It has led to a lot of conflicts between the herdsmen and the indigenous communities whose only means of livelihood is agriculture, mostly subsistence agriculture. And because the farming cycle is just like once in a year, if your farm produce gets eaten up by cattle or livestock of some sort, then you have to wait for the entire year, to be able to get anything out of your farms again, for the next year. So it's really very frustrating, and this has been a source of conflict for many decades, But I don't also think that the current approach is going to solve the problem. It's good to pass a law that says no more grazing of livestock in the conventional way that we have seen it, for the decades. But what is the institutional framework that has been put in place to ensure that ranches actually get established and that livestock get moved into those ranches? What I expected the government to have done, since May, when the law was established, was when the anti-grazing law was signed into, a bill was signed into law, was to ensure that a framework was created to encourage private entrepreneurs to go into the business of ranching, so that when open grazing becomes a crime, as it became on the 31st of October, on the 1st of November, which was yesterday, there will be ranches where the livestock that are currently in situ in Benue will be moved into. But we don't have any functional ranches in Benue as we speak. So where do you expect the cows that were in Benue legitimately on the 31st of October 2017 to go to on the 1st of November 2017? Laws are supposed to be made in a way that makes it obeyable. But if you make a law just to play to the gallery and to create an environment which becomes a booby trap, then we have to relook the entire process of the establishment of the law. I have recommended on several platforms, in the recent past, that what should have happened is to create a win-win situation. The herdsmen have been used to grazing their cattle openly throughout the country, for centuries. They are used to this practice of their own form of agriculture. But it interferes with the rights of the indigenous farmers who do not have any other means of livelihood apart from farming, in the normal way that they have always known since they inherited it from their ancestors. How do we create a win-win situation?
If I may just cut in here, it sounds like you're saying it's almost impossible implementing this law in Benue State, but you also know that the herdsmen are said to be leaving the state on account of this law. So what does this say about citizens having the right to live where they choose to live or where they want to live? Exactly. That again is the point. Why would you make a law that ostracizes a section of this country? The Land Use Act says that every Nigerian has a right to land, in every part of the country. So if we're trying to create integration, if we're trying to establish a situation where everybody feels at home, why would you, stigmatize a certain set of people just because they are not from a particular place? We're trying to create an all-inclusive country. What I would have expected to happen is a situation where the actual implementation of the law would create an avenue for private entrepreneurs to establish ranches that are commercially viable. And what I have recommended is a situation where government encourages the setting up of ranches by creating a fund which grants single interest loans, single-digit interest loans to people who want to establish ranches, to set up their ranches, give them long moratorium, and then in those ranches that are set up using funds that are flexible to obtain, when you already have access to land that is 10 hectares or more, you will fence in the area with transparent wire gauges, and then you also in those ranches set up a school, where in each of the ranches set up a school where the nomads can send their kids, and then you have an abattoir where you can. Mr. Ahmed, if I may just cut in here, do you think that this would help to stop the killings in this state? Because this is the main reason why this law is being implemented. I genuinely think that the Fulanis and the indigenous people of the people who are indigenous to Benue, we can live together. We have lived together with the Fulanis for centuries. For ages. You have always, had the herdsmen graze their cattle, for as long as we have cohabited together. But when you create a situation that leads to a feeling that cows are not wanted, we need the cows to be able to provide the meat that everybody wants on their table. So let's look at it from that commercial perspective, where we see that the herdsmen validly are entitled to carry on their business, but they must carry it on in a very civilized manner that does not interfere with the rights of the indigenous farmers. And this can be done as a win-win. Rather than decree it and on one day and you say all herdsmen must leave. How can you ask people to leave?
How can you ask people to leave on a certain day?
I'm afraid we'll have to
without
I'm afraid we have to leave it at that. We do appreciate you joining us on the News at 10. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Madaki Ame, legal practitioner. In part 2 after the break, the House of Representatives begins investigation into State House Clinic in Abuja. Stay with us.